We're diving into Harper 5.0 with Bari, Kris, and Ethan today. If you've been watching the Harper project, you know this is a big one. So let's jump in. Bari, for people who may not have been following Harper closely, what does the 5.0 release represent for the company?
Yeah, so I think the 5.0 release is pretty exciting on a couple of vectors. As many people know, or maybe not, Harper was founded with the guiding principle of simplicity without sacrifice. And what that really shakes down to, or what we really try to honor when we think about that, is simplifying development while still improving performance. And what the 5.0 release signifies, among other things, is our move to being truly open source, not just with the open source Harper that we shared several months ago that Ethan's going to talk more about later, but also making source available under the Elastic license, Harper Pro, which is our enterprise package. And by doing that, we really believe we can not only benefit from the amazing thought leadership that comes out of the OpenJS community and being able to get even better by developers who experience Harper being able to contribute directly to our repo, but also by leaning into how people develop now, which is obviously via agentic tools and engineering. And Harper as a collapse stack, as we used to call it, having database, cache, messaging, application all being in process, already lends itself incredibly well by having that kind of condensed surface area, that minimal serialization, those reduced network hops do a lot already to make it easier to work with an agent. But having all of that source code available for the agent to process in real time really ups the guarantee that what you're building in concert with these AI agents, with these AI models, will be of the highest quality and will perform instantly on Harper, which we're really, really, really proud of. It also introduces RocksDB as a native storage engine alongside the option to use LMDB. We're really, really proud of the storage engine we have already. LMDB is obviously known for its highly optimized read capabilities, and we're already really proud of the performance that people see on Harper as a result. But by introducing RocksDB as another native option, developers will also be able to get that same benefit for incredibly write-heavy workloads, which we think, again, when we think more about not just the developer experience of being able to choose between what is best for you, but also being able to optimize performance for your end users in a seamless fashion is really going to be fantastic. And we're very, very proud of the amount of care that Kris and his team have taken to make sure that this update, while native and obviously a major release, will not involve having to re-architect your whole application, that all of those developer ergonomics we have come to really pride ourselves on stay true, and this change will be as seamless, natural, and evolutionary as possible for the developers who lean into it and choose to take advantage of it. So
Wow.
exciting
Wow.
stuff.
Yeah, I'll tell a lot there. So we got open source, we have RocksDB as a new storage engine, and it seems like there's a lot of power here from an agentic engineering perspective. So thinking of engineers here, Kris, I know you've really poured your heart and soul into this. So from an engineering perspective, how significant is this release? Like, what has changed under the hood, and what makes Harper 5.0 possible?
Yeah. Yeah, kind of starting with what Barry talked about, adopting RocksDB as a storage engine has been a significant engineering um, change, and supporting both of these engines at the same time. It's really allowed us, though, to significantly improve the way that we handle transactions, providing more robust handling and isolation, and it's given us a lot of extra ability to manage things like backups and management of the database as a whole. Um, there's also been significant engineering work that's gone into restructuring the way that we're handling transaction logs. So we use a standard write-ahead transaction log with RocksDB that's deeply integrated with how we do replication, with how we do real-time messaging. And so there's been a lot of architectural changes and refactoring to really center around that and leverage that in an efficient and optimal way. We've also put a lot of engineering effort into improving just the mechanisms by which we load and contain applications and user code that runs in Harper, and doing that in a more secure and contained way for more robust security going forward.
Wow, so this is really like a
Yeah.
technological kind of jump forward in a very positive way here. So thinking about the open source side of this, Ethan, I know you've kind of had a big role in bringing Harper to be open source. We first announced becoming open source at the JS conference in Chesapeake Bay last October. What has happened between that announcement and this 5.0 release?
Yeah, it's been the culmination of all of our team's efforts and work, and the core repo is available, has been available, and we are actively developing in it. We are shifting towards a like work in the open or just like a public process for everything from feature requests to bug reports. Beyond that, we have like everyone else has mentioned already, we have like the Harper Pro release, and that's going to be source available sooner than later. We have a ton of plugins and applications and examples. Repos are all open sourced, appropriately licensed. We've been growing our public Discord channel. And in general, we are just fully embracing the new, this new engineering workflow and being just an open first engineering organization.
Yeah. So like, what does this really mean for practical terms in engineers and developers building with Harper?
Yeah, absolutely. So what this comes down to is we now have separated the Harper as a product into two things. The Harper Pro is a lot more aligned to the like previous Harper DB, and Harper Pro is, like we said, is a source available license, which means you can look at the code, you can pull it down, you can build it, you can run it yourself. But what you can't do with the under the ELv2 license for Harper Pro and that source available code is essentially build a competing business with Harper. You can't go ahead and offer, Harper Pro hosting on your own. However, the open core, which we are calling just Harper, that is licensed under the Apache 2.0 license, and it is fully 100% open source. You can take it and you can do whatever you want with it, including building a company around it. If you want to compete directly with Harper and create your own kind of version of Harper Pro based on the Harper core and provide hosting and provide services for it, all of that is allowed under an open source license, and we embrace that. That was a major part of the decision to go open source and source available, is that our core technology we want people building on, we want people experimenting with, we want people extending from. And then like I said, the source available Harper Pro version, that's how we operate as a business. That is what will keep us going. This will keep us running, and it'll be able to allow us to continue the development of Harper and our wider contributions to the JavaScript ecosystem.
Okay, so the crux of like why is this really important for Harper, for developers? Like, why does this matter?
Yeah, so open source is an incredibly important piece to modern day engineering. Every organization in the world is using open source one way or another, some more than others. And the point of Harper itself being open source is aligned with our more general ethos of just respecting and being great stewards for open source JavaScript in general, or open source anything. We're not just JavaScript. And to that point, it's very counterintuitive to be so forthcoming as an open source company, or as like or wanting to say sponsor open source or contribute to open source, while not actually putting our money where our mouth is, so to speak, and sharing what we're building as open source too. The community, the ecosystem benefits when there are more of us working together in the open and sharing how we are implementing things, how we are using other open source tools. And to all of that, our open source doesn't just stop with us sharing what we're building. It goes beyond that, as I've mentioned, where we are going to contribute upstream to the runtime we're built on. Node.js, we're actively involved in the Node.js project. We're actively involved in the OpenJS Foundation. We will continue to release things through the company as open source so others can use it. But we are also going to contribute to things that other people and other companies are building too. And that's all a part of just being a part of the grand open source ecosystem.
Awesome. So there really is a big community play here. Like, we want to build out in the open. We want other people to contribute. This is kind of a really solid ethos bringing this to the open. Coming to the 5.0 here, so it sounds like there's two things, Ethan, you spoke about. You talked about Harper 5.0, but there's also Harper Pro along with that. I was wondering, Kris, if you could break down what happens when somebody installs just the Harper version of this. What capabilities are they getting in that runtime?
Sure, yeah. The open source Harper gives you a full data application platform. That means that you have database functionality that's available in process directly to your application code. You have a full framework for building endpoints, for accessing that data, for creating subscriptions, getting real-time information, sending messages, and all of that is a part of our data application platform. And then to distinguish that from Harper Pro provides the additional functionality to enable replication between different nodes and additional functionality for managing certificates that are typically associated with the distributed service part of deploying Harper. And so that really is the ability to scale Harper in a significant way.
Awesome. So Harper is like run it on a single node kind of thing, or deploy. I think we are a cloud offering, Harper Fabric, and then Harper Pro this is like the enterprise. They want to deploy on their own servers. They want to manage their own clusters. Am I understanding that right?
Yeah. And, this has really been developed in a way where we fully intend that you can download the open source Harper, build applications on it, build plugins for it. And those things are going to work the same way in Harper as they do in Harper Pro. Basically, the only difference is that Harper Pro is now unlocking a wider distribution for high scale, typically for more enterprise performance oriented use.
Okay. So when we think about it mentioned that Harper combines like database, caching, messaging, kind of logic, and all these interfaces all into one runtime. Why is that unified approach valuable compared to assembling these components separately?
There's actually a lot of overhead involved in assembling all those components together, sending messages between different processes. There's kind of often a hidden latent cost of serialization, deserialization that's involved in going between these different systems. There's often extra effort that's involved in coordinating authentication between the systems, making sure that these connections are secure. There can be additional overhead just involved in the operating system running all these different processes. And so the unified approach, first and foremost, is about efficiency and performance and allowing these types of interactions to take place that what are typically in traditional systems, we often measure the time it takes for application code to call database and get a response. We typically measure those in milliseconds. But when you're talking about in process, oftentimes you can access data and we're talking about things in microseconds or even maybe the singular version of microsecond. And so it's a radically different approach and huge benefits in terms of that efficiency and performance to be able to bring these things together and not have to be spinning up different processes to do it. But we also see this in terms of just the developer's velocity, not just the velocity of the application. Having all of these things in one place just means a lot less complexity for the development process, and having to manage all of these different moving pieces. Having all of those in a single unified thing means that you're building an application on one platform, you deploy it on one platform, and it just works. You don't have to worry about making sure that you've coordinated and orchestrated this across multiple different systems and servers.
So it's faster for developers, and it's also just a faster app source, faster services you can build on this. That seems like a pretty solid combination there. Coming back to like RocksDB, this is the big headline. This is the architectural change here for 5.0. What drove the decision to introduce RocksDB into the platform? I understand it's managed by Meta. Is that correct? Is that the lead here?
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct. And actually has kind of a storied history of contributions from a number of different companies. It was actually originally based upon some research and development out of Google with LevelDB, inspired by a lot of ideas that came out of some Apache projects. And so there's actually been quite a bit of different influences. And so in some ways, it kind of represents the merger of some of the best and top ideas in database storage brought together into a single platform. And that's really, I think, one of the major drivers for why we've really pursued RocksDB, is because it really does kind of represent, the combination of the pinnacle of like low-level database thinking and refinement. So it's a very well managed and maintained project, and the culmination of, I think, a lot of these different ideas and the years of iteration and building RocksDB, in some ways means that RocksDB has been very well adapted to a lot of different use cases. And so, we've really had some great success with LMDB in the use cases that we've kind of grown up with here at Harper. And so as we have been working on expanding the ways that Harper can be used in different scenarios, it really makes sense to look to RocksDB that has been very well optimized for different record sizes, different write throughputs, different levels of cardinality of indexes, and there's actually so many different factors that can go into database performance. And so being able to have a system that's really has been kind of honed and polished for a lot of different circumstances, and a lot of the different needs that are required for in enterprise databases. I think that's been a big driver, and we're really excited about what some of the things that's going to unlock for us.
So thinking about what that does unlock, like comparing these two, like what does LMDB not have that RocksDB is offering us? Is there a certain performance difference here that is really key to us making this decision?
Yeah, and I think that at the highest level, it really does come down to performance and storage efficiency. I think those efficiency and performance are always going hand in hand. And there's definitely a lot of like technical aspects of how RocksDB, for example, performs much better for larger data structures. LMDB has challenges with maintaining an efficient layout of the storage layer when there is large amounts of large records that are heterogeneous in size and dealing with fragmentation issues. RocksDB has been really well designed to have this continuous compaction layering system that really works well for dealing with large structures and continually adjusting the layout on disk to access that in an optimal way. So, yeah, I think the thing that it's really going to unlock is a lot of these very high write centric applications that are dealing with a lot of data throughput, and being able to use that in an efficient way and having an efficient storage of that data.
So yeah, sounds like a lot of great things here are happening with this. My understanding here is that we're also still planning on supporting LMDB as well. Like, why maintain both options, and how should developers think about choosing between one versus the other?
Sure. First and foremost, it comes down to backwards compatibility. We want to be able to give people a smooth upgrade process. And so that means that we want people to be able to move to version 5 without having to migrate and go through rewriting the whole database. We will be providing migration scripts for moving from LMDB to RocksDB. But that's the basic reason, is just simply backwards compatibility and making sure that there's smooth upgrade. Yeah. One other thing I will also throw in there, just in terms of RocksDB and LMDB differences, is RocksDB also has like a significantly more robust transaction handling mechanism. And so that's another thing that we're very excited about, is that this gives us a significantly improved way of being able to isolate and handle writes and transactions and perform queries in a really intuitive transaction model, even through JavaScript. And so that will be something where it's a backwards compatible upgrade, but then as you upgrade into it, it'll unlock new ways of creating more sophisticated functions with isolation.
Huh, that sounds powerful. So my understanding of this is that we built a new JavaScript binding for RocksDB as part of this work. Is that something the broader Node ecosystem can use outside of Harper?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. This is fully open source, and it's available at harperfast/rocksdb JS. And there's actually been quite a bit of work that's gone into designing this RocksDB library in a way that not only serves Harper, but is a very generally useful key value store on its own right. And so we've actually long maintained the main LMDB JS library, and that's gotten significant use. There's definitely a huge value to the community that we've seen in having a really high performance and robust key value store. And so as we work on this new system with RocksDB, we really are excited about making that available to the community and the opportunities that can afford people.
Yeah, I think it really helps us live that open source story that Ethan was talking about earlier. So that's great to see. So thinking about upgrading to 5.0, for developers already running like a Harper 4.x, what does this upgrade path look like for 5.0? Is it like a lift and shift, or are there migration steps they should plan?
For most of the applications that I often interact with and look at with some of our users, it should simply run in 5.0. But it is worthwhile. Like in a major version, we do take the opportunity to clean up APIs, make improvements, and some of those are backwards compatible breaking. We've always tried to minimize that and have as smooth of upgrade as path as possible. So I'll just kind of go through a few of those just to kind of highlight some of the things that we've been changing with that. One of those things is that a central part of Harper with JavaScript development is the resource API for how you interact with data in our database. We've really tried to create a cleaner and simpler approach to being able to retrieve records from a table and getting a basic, clean, simple object back that is enumerable. And so with that, we've actually kind of cleaned out some of the methods that were often returned on the objects that are returned from get. So it is possible that there's existing code that you may have existing code that would use some of those. So all of those methods are still available through other means. So there would probably just be potentially some other methods that would be called. There's also been changes that we've made to having a more constrained environment for application code to constrain from application code just spawning up random processes. There's important security implications to that. So for code that may be spawning new processes, there'll probably simply be a process for defining allowed processes that are to be run in your configuration. And so that will just be like a tighter security mechanism. So there might have to be a few changes for that. But for most code that is generally just simply interacting at a JavaScript level, the upgrade path should be fairly simple. And like I said, we also will be having migration scripts so that you could upgrade, use version 5, and at a convenient time, potentially migrate from LMDB to RocksDB. And there's no application code changes that are involved in that. You just simply are upgrading to a new database storage system.
Okay, so there does seem to be a few elements to it, especially for our enterprise customers here, Bari. How are we helping them make this transition from the 4.x to the 5.0?
So I think at a baseline, one of the biggest things we do for not just our enterprise customers, but all our customers when we're looking at any release, but especially a major, is a very, very comprehensive QA and testing process, not just from a functional standpoint, but we've also taken the time, and Kris has really worked very closely with our engineering team to do a lot of use case driven testing. So taking the templates and applications and components, as we call it, that our enterprise customers use as the baseline for all of their workloads and actually operating them on 5.0, on our own platform, on Fabric, as well as on whatever clouds they may be running, and making sure that everything is operating performantly as expected within SLA and even beyond, because we really pride ourselves on having that performance. In terms of all of the scripting and interfaces that Kris talked about and having touch points there, we also have a great forward deployed engineering team that our enterprise customers have really close engagements with, and they're always available to help make sure that process is as seamless as possible. Also, it might be worth mentioning that Ethan has also led a really intensive docs rewrite over the past several months, and we're really proud of that. And that should help for not just 5.0, but again, for just utilizing any of these interfaces, either as a new customer or as an enterprise customer who's getting to know them differently as we've made all of these evolutions to make it as clear as possible what is changing and how best to interact with it to get maximal value.
Awesome. Let's jump into the docs since that came up. Ethan, you're the one doing a lot of this work here. Can you speak to kind of what these changes are and what people can expect jumping into the new 5.0 docs?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been hard at work over the past few, uh, basically months at this point, re-architecting the docs from the ground up. We are mainly splitting them into two different sections. The first being the proper reference docs, which are going
Hmm.
to be highly technical, verbose, covering all aspects of the platform in all levels of technical specificity, meaning that some sections might be a little bit higher level, such as the general architecture of how our database system works, or the general architecture of how our application loading works. But in that same reference, there might be another page that dives deep into, okay, like how do all the threads resolve, and what's the async nature of application loading, or to the database system, like how does the transaction log work, and like how did it work for LMDB, how is it changing for RocksDB, and so on and so forth. And and that's going to be all organized into one section of the docs. And on the other side, we're developing a new, more prose like guide section called Harper Learn. And the Learn section of the docs is where you're going to find sort of step by step guides for all sorts of Harper features and Harper
Hmm.
um, development practices. This is going to be things as simple as getting started,
Hmm.
to more in depth topics like properly implementing cache tables, or caching or using our custom resource API. It'll even have guides such as administration. So, like,
Hmm.
how do you configure Harper? What are appropriate settings? Hopefully, eventually, this will be a space where we'll have plenty of open source guides for how to really leverage that Harper core, that open source core, to its maximum. And then, of course, there'll be separate guides for Harper Pro and beyond. Um, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds like there's a huge amount of work that went into that. Thank you for doing that. Um, so thinking, you mentioned Harper Pro there. I want to kind of jump back to Harper Pro and really understand how decisions were made. Like, how did we decide what stayed in Harper Pro and what is in the open source Harper? Kris, could you speak to that?
Sure. Yeah, I think that this really was driven by we wanted to make the open source a true, fully capable application development platform. And so, to that end, we didn't want to do anything that would cripple the ability to create powerful applications and plugins, and build upon that with Harper open source. So, the main decision factors in terms of how are we separating things out is most of what we have in Harper Pro is really the things that enable us to power our Harper Fabric service in a way that is distributed, scalable. And so some of the differentiations we had to make were things like we wanted to provide built-in analytics capability to be able to have good insights into your application while you're doing application development, but also differentiate that there are application or that there's analytic capabilities that have more to do with Harper as a managed service and monitoring other processes that are executing and understanding resource consumption and how we manage that as a service and handle that in our infrastructure.
So I believe one of the kind of major things here is real-time replication and clustering capabilities for Harper Pro. What makes Harper Pro's replication model unique?
I think one of the things that makes it unique is, kind of going back to the fundamental mindset of Harper is how deeply integrated it is into our system. So our replication model is entirely built upon basically tracking the transaction log and using the transaction log as the driver for replication. Now, a write-ahead transaction log is commonplace with database, and even using a transaction log for the purposes of replication isn't entirely new either. But I think what makes Harper unique is how uniquely optimized the transaction log is for replication purposes. Typically, a write-ahead transaction log, the primary purpose of it is to achieve writes of data to disk for durability purposes. And so it's usually, you think about it first in terms of writing, but we really built our system to think about it first and foremost in terms of reading from the transaction log, and the most optimal way of doing that in a way that will drive replication. One of the things that's actually also unique about this is that we actually maintain separate transaction logs for different routes in our replication cluster, and so that we can actually do routing through different nodes and actually pull from specific transaction logs to achieve different adaptive paths of replication. And so I think that's a very, very unique approach and architecture for how replication is driven internally. And with that, I think that really gives us a lot of topological flexibility with how we deploy Harper and still do so in a highly performant way. And that really, another aspect of this is that part of Harper is that we have things like MQTT capabilities, server-side events, WebSockets for subscribing to data and getting real-time updates on data. That's all part of the same infrastructure. That's all connecting to that same transaction log. That's both providing durability, but also providing this real-time stream of data that drives everything from your WebSocket real-time updates to replication.
So it seems like a lot of things serve a dual purpose, and there's like a lot of efficiency to be found there. Is that a fair statement? Yeah.
It is.
Cool.
Yeah. That's very much a good way of describing Harper, is that there is a lot of effort that goes into making it this very integrative concept where a lot of functionality can be derived from individual components in Harper.
Okay. Makes sense. So Ethan, kind of wrapping things up on Harper Pro here, how does the licensing work there? When would somebody choose Harper Pro versus deploying on Harper Fabric?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Elastic License v2 for Harper Pro is the best way we can, the simplest way I can put it is it has two restrictions. The first is that you cannot have a competing managed service. So you can't take Harper Pro and offer it yourself as a hosted service to others, because that would directly compete with Harper's core business, which is one of Harper's core businesses products, Harper Fabric. Furthermore, you cannot circumvent any licensing keys that we have in place. So you can't remove or bypass any of the licensing mechanisms in that software. All that means is you can take Harper Pro and use it yourself if you want to. You just must follow the rules set forth by the software. And again, to kind of hammer it home, that's separate from trying to offer it as a hosted service. Again, like it comes down to your implementation and your usage of it. If you come in and you want to just take the Harper Pro off the shelf and run it yourself, you're welcome to. You just have to follow our licensing model. You either paying for licensing or using it within its relative free use terms. All of that is simplified if you sign up for Harper Fabric. If you go on Harper Fabric and deploy a free instance, you're going to have Harper Pro and you won't have to pay us a penny. And you get all the benefits of our managed hosted service, Harper Fabric, and you get to use Harper Pro, and replication is there, the clustering is there, certificate management, all of those great features are enabled, and it's free. And if you need more capacity beyond what the free level of Harper Fabric provides, then you can pay directly through Harper Fabric. There's no complicated licensing agreement. There's no complicated verification mechanisms necessary. You don't have to deal with the headaches of running, enterprise software. And instead, you just get all of the great benefits of Harper Pro, and Harper Fabric for, the relatively ease of use.
I'm going to try to break this down. Harper is open source. If you want to deploy that to a managed service, you deploy that via Harper Fabric. If you want to have the kind of power of Harper Fabric, but do this on your own servers, then you're using Harper Pro. Do I have that correct?
Little bit. I can try and break it down like you are. Harper Pro is based on Harper. So Harper itself, the open source core, is fully runnable on its own. And in fact, you can take the Harper open source core and you can run it on your own. You can even build an entire company very similar to ourselves, providing Harper open source core for a price to other people, and that is 100% allowed. Harper Pro, or source, available extension of Harper, the open source core, you cannot do that with. Harper Pro has restrictions in place. You cannot offer it as a managed service to other people. And if you want to run it and build your business on top of it, again, not in the way of like trying to compete with Harper, but you're essentially building an application or a product on it, you may still need to satisfy certain licensing agreements that we've set forth. I believe that to date, we've allowed like free use of Harper in the context of educational or evaluation purposes. But if you want to run a production workload on our Harper Pro, you need to sign up and get a license. Harper Fabric is our hosted managed service provider for Harper Pro. So if you want to simplify your usage of Harper in general, you can just sign up for Harper Fabric and you can focus on building your application instead of focusing on managing enterprise level infrastructure.
Okay, that makes sense. So Harper Fabric is really kind of this cloud layer here, and I want to dig a little bit more in on Harper Fabric. I was wondering, Bari, if you could talk to about what this enables for developers that they couldn't easily do before.
Harper Fabric is the platform on which you can most easily run Harper. And what it does is it allows you to leverage all of those Harper Pro features, especially native replication at scale, without having to take on any of the complexity that comes with running something on a cloud platform, having to pick a provider, having to educate yourself on different data centers, regionality, the cardinality, all of the different latency factors that would enable you from picking a location where your end users are and optimizing it. Harper Fabric, the same way that the Harper core abstracts all of the difficulty of having to pick all of these disparate providers and systems and somehow getting them to serialize and work together and manage themselves, takes that away from you as well when it comes to the deployment layer, where you can deploy easily and get that performance without having to concern yourselves with all of the complexities of the how.
So Bari, you brought up the concepts of performance. And I want to kind of understand what this really means here. Are we talking about latency? Are we talking about throughput? how do we understand Harper Fabric and like what is performant here?
That's a really good question. Harper Fabric, when we're talking about performance, we were talking about the combination of throughput at scale. So having your desired latency at the throughput limits and having the limits associated with your workload. When you go into Fabric to deploy it yourself, you'll see in our dropdown, it's actually quite intuitive. You select what your read per minute volume might be, and there are other limits like writes, data transfers, messaging you can also look into depending on your use case. And all you have to pick from there is what region or regions you will be realizing traffic in and the performance that you would like to see realized at scale. And the reason we have that is I think a lot of other cloud providers very well-meaningly give developers a lot of choice to help them achieve what they think they want for the things they ask for to symbolize and illustrate their goal, which is to have performance for their end users. They ask for specific locations. They ask for specific data centers. They ask for numbers of those data centers and different redundancy factors associated with it. Harper Fabric handles all of that seamlessly behind the scenes to make sure that you can have that performance without having to make any of those decisions. We just take care of it for you on the back end.
Okay, so if I want to have a global cluster of these nodes kind of distributed across the globe so that people in different regions have low latency, it sounds like Fabric just takes all of that effort away
Yes.
from me, and it's just a matter of a selection. Yeah.
That's exactly right. It's picking global. Let's say you want 1 million writes per minute on a dedicated infrastructure, because you can also pick if you want dedicated or co-located. You pick your distribution level, which is the performance level you would want, which can be quite performant at any scale. And then you just hit go, and you can be deployed and live in as quick as 5 minutes.
Okay, that sounds awesome. I everyone should be using Harper Fabric. Seems like the
I
way to go
totally
here.
agree, Alex.
So, kind of wrapping this up a little bit, and bring this like in the context of what's happening in the world today. We've seen this huge shift towards agentic engineering that's been going on. Harper's unified runtime seems to have some unique power in this. I know that Harper, we talk about our unified runtime having fewer moving parts, and that is beneficial for AI from an architectural standpoint. How does that simplify things when agents are generating and deploying applications? So, Kris, why does how does Harper's unified runtime and agentic engineering work together?
I think we've all kind of observed that the modern LLM-driven application development is actually astonishing in what it can produce, right? Like you can give Cloud Code or something like that a prompt, and it's able to really quickly whip up impressive applications. But what we're actually looking at is kind of more of a prototype. It's something that runs locally on your system, looks pretty cool, but there's always like the additional steps of then, well, is this wired up to your database? Is it just working with seed data? Are there other components in your system? Does this need to be wired up to a caching layer? How is this going to integrate with CDN? How are you going to deploy and manage this on cloud servers? Is this going to scale? So oftentimes, AI tools today are really giving you this amazing initial experience with this prototype, but being able to take that further can be challenging. And it's challenging because it fundamentally does involve orchestrating across multiple systems. And that's something that AI can do, but oftentimes that really gets past the where AI really excels, where you've given it this really well contained context for it to work in, and now you're having to explain to the AI or give it instructions on how to connect to these other systems. And that's where it actually gets more laborious. And also, this gets into another interesting aspect of AI, in that one of the most challenging parts of AI is also the security element of AI. We are constantly being faced with these new opportunities for agents to do more, but at the same time, it's unlocking and raising potential concerns about exposing our credentials to systems that we may not want those exposed to. And so, yes, we have a very different experience in Harper because we're starting with a platform that's already encapsulating all of that. That context is already there for the AI to go beyond just simply creating maybe a pretty front end with some seed data, but it's actually already wiring together everything that's needed to run the application fully and even deploy it to Harper Fabric. And do so without having to now orchestrate and have access to a lot of different systems. This kind of works hand in hand with one of the most important concepts in security, that encapsulation, being able to contain and adhere to the principle of least authority, fundamentally creates more secure systems. And so by being able to build on this system, AI just has a great time taking advantage of having the full context of everything in one place, being able to build a full application, and being able to unlock really powerful deployment of applications in a secure way. And we've seen this at Harper. I've had coworkers that don't have coding engineering experience that are, putting in a prompt, creating an application, but not just creating an application, like deploying it, and it's basically a production-ready application. It's already distributed geographically, ready to scale. Already has OAuth built into it. A lot of these things that are often big extra steps when you're doing development. And so I think that's really the type of thing that it unlocks.
Interesting. So it almost sounds like Harper, like this concept of a unified runtime is almost like the ideal architecture, the perfect architecture maybe for an AI system to work with. Is that going too far making those statements, or do you think that's accurate?
I don't think it's going too far.
That's
Yeah.
totally
No,
fair.
I totally agree. Yeah.
Cool. So Bari, from a production perspective, how do you see developers using Harper when building applications with AI?
Well, I think, as Kris said, that you can get production ready quite quickly. And by giving all of that context to AI and having that unified runtime, it really saves you a lot of that overhead and decision fatigue in partnership with AI that you have to do. It's not impossible to say, I would like Mongo as my database, I would like Redis as my cache, I would like Vercel as my front end, but that can become quite cumbersome for both robots and you. Again, that unified runtime speaks to the value. There are also just a few very simple prompts. You could give Claude Code, you can give OpenAI, you can give Anti-Gravity to immediately begin benefiting from a lot of the work we've already put in by creating native skills files, by having all of these templates open source and leaning through it and leaning on those examples, AI in partnership with these very thoughtful developers and product people, frankly, who are more rooted in the strategic value of these end products, but not necessarily as knowledgeable on how to build them, can give these thoughtful prompts of, I would like to build a performant page caching system on Harper and deploy to Harper Fabric. And by just having those few different sentiments built into your prompting, you've already answered the question of every different disparate system you have to need. And you can just focus on what you want those optimizations and what different artifacts you want to plug in. And again, be at value so much more quickly than you would be before the advent of agentic engineering, but especially before you had the option of having all four of these systems in process.
Awesome. So yeah, for all those listening out there, if you're as stoked on this as we are, I would recommend checking out our NPM package. It's NPM create Harper at latest. And it will help you spin up Harper, fully scaffold it with the skills files and everything you need to just hit the ground running, building your applications agentically on Harper.
Yeah.
So now coming to a closing of this, kind of want to wrap this up. I know that 5.0 is kind of a big push here is just this, it's fully open source. And I know with that, we want to encourage contributions from the community and perhaps even some innovations here. I was wondering, Ethan, if you could speak to like, what are you most excited to see happen now that we have 5.0 out in the world?
Yeah, this is probably like my most favorite part of all of this is that, there's just so much that's going to come from us building in the open. And I think the first is we are just going to be lowering the barrier for like first contributions. I want to see new people contributing to Harper. I want to see our customers contributing to Harper. I think there's a lot of opportunity for the open source core to become a very healthy ecosystem, not just for corporate entities, but also benefiting from the fact that a lot of corporate entities are running their businesses on this software. Beyond that, I think that, some of the greatest product development comes from building in public and having, you know, having those conversations publicly instead of privately. Of course, we'll always respect our customers, you know, private communication channels and like, you know, customer feedback, security feedback, all of that will absolutely remain private. But deciding on what feature comes next, deciding on breaking changes, deciding on what we fix, what we don't fix, all of that stuff should happen publicly. Just because we have an internal chat channel doesn't mean that's where all the business has to happen. And then beyond all of that, I think, you know, the nature of open source. I got my career started because of open source, because projects like Node.js made it easy to contribute. And there is a very wonderful cycle here where if we can make Harper open source as easy to contribute to as possible, we may be able to mentor the next generation of developers. And those developers can start their journeys with Harper, and they can go off and build fantastic products themselves, fantastic companies, or even join Harper eventually. And all of that starts with Harper open sourcing its core module and the Harper 5.0 release.
Yeah, but as you're speaking there, I got like chills because like what we're offering here with this unified runtime and sitting at the edge of what's just going to be the future of agentic engineering. This could likely be what changes things and how we operate and the infrastructure behind it. It's very exciting times. I want to give Kris too an opportunity here. Looking back like a year from now, what do you hope that 5.0 really means for the developer ecosystem?
Yeah, you know, I think that I'm always most excited by seeing Harper used in, you know, very combining a lot of the different powers of Harper together. You know, there is so much there, and I think that that's where I get excited seeing how it's used. So I definitely am hoping that, yeah, this unlocks new opportunities for users to be able to combine things that may involve, you know, higher write throughput, but also combining that with real-time messaging, data access, more sophisticated querying. Yeah, I am also excited for what that'll unlock in terms of community development of potentially new applications and plugins and components that can fit into Harper, and how those things can be put together in a modular way to really leverage the broad functionality of Harper and create applications that utilize a wide variety of functionality to produce interesting results.
Cool. It sounds like people can create anything here, and it's just kind of up to them how far their creativity will take them. Bari, can you close this off for us? What are you hoping that people kind of do and realize with Harper 5.0? Why does this moment matter?
I think it sounds really trite and silly coming from a product person, but I really think this moment matters because Harper revolutionized things in a lot of ways for developer ergonomics and performance by having all of these things coexist in a single process in a way that we see with our enterprise customers, especially with performance at scale. I think by having our core open source, by having our more enterprise bundle source available in concert with revolutionizing our storage engine by extending it to also have RocksDB natively, we're giving the opportunity for the entire OpenJS community that we are so proud to be a part of to really see and experiment with this for themselves and have that not be kind of behind this golden gate for just enterprise customers that have the time and the talent to experiment with it, but for everyone in partnership with Agentic Engineering to really immediately see the value of Harper at scale and to just join us on this journey by contributing to the repo.
Awesome. So thank you all for joining me here today. It's a very exciting times at Harper, but perhaps even for the world here with this unified runtime, fully open source, ready for anybody to build with the agents they would like to build with. So we're excited, and you should be too. So we'll catch you next time, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Yay!